Okay, this is day 3 of our shape animation lesson. So we have the dancing stars. So let's say at a certain point I want the dancing stars to leave the frame. So remember, we're building an animation. It's kind of like choreographing a dance. You decide the configuration, the formation of your objects, when they're going to come in, how they're going to interact, when they're going to come on stage, when they're going to leave stage. Keep things hopping along. You don't want anything to be kind of dying on the vine. You want stuff to be unfolding, one thing leading into another. So maybe I want these guys to kind of leave at a certain point. So my yellow stars, I'm going to press U for useful to bring up my keyframing on the yellow stars, so I just see the duration of keyframes that it took to create the twist dance. So maybe before the twist dance ultimately ends, they start rising off screen. So then I'm gonna do position. So I want to hold the position here for a duration of time. You can see I've got 2 position keyframes already for when they came in. I want to hold that position right about here. So that last position keyframe, I'm holding it by adding a keyframe. So I click the add keyframe button, and now I want the stars to just levitate off screen by about the end twist keyframe. So I'm lining up to the end twist keyframe, which is the angle. And then I'm just going to levitate these guys back where they came from. So they're going in a straight line. I'm just adjusting the Y value. So they've moved in a straight line up. So they leave, they're out of there, and then the circles are still, the bubbles are still rotating. Okay, so now I want something else to happen at a certain point. So maybe I want the bubbles to kind of gradually get more transparent. So I'm going to select bubbles and press T to bring up opacity, and then I'm gonna hold opacity at this point because it looks like I have opacity keyframing going on, and I want to hold at 100% here, and then I want the bubbles to gradually get more and more transparent till they get all the way transparent to the end. So they gradually are disappearing as they're rotating. Okay, so that works. Okay, so then at a certain point, maybe before the bubbles start disappearing, I want to have, well, maybe after the stars leave the frame, or maybe as they just start disappearing. Now I want to add another shape layer. So I click outside to deselect, and then I'm going to go to my ellipse tool and choose a color. My fill options, I want to make sure that my fill options, I chose the word fill to get to my fill options. Word fill right here. And then I'm choosing solid color. Choose a solid color, maybe like a lavender. And then I'm gonna hold down shift to make a perfect circle and drag out a circle. And then I can adjust my stroke thicker. And I can adjust where the object is anchored. So I'm going to click on the anchor point, click on my shape layer and drag that point holding down Command so it goes to the center. And I can center this to the center of the document if I mean the center of the composition if I use my align panel. If you don't see your align panel, you can go to Window and bring up the align panel, but it's right here. So I can, right now it's set to align to composition, and then I can choose horizontal center alignment, vertical center alignment, and click on those buttons so it's centered. If I wanted to, let's see, I'm just going to call this shape layer circle. So I'm selecting it, I'm going to press return. I'm going to call it circle, press return. Maybe I want another circle on this circle shape layer. So I am going to just take my ellipse tool, hold down shift, drag out another ellipse, and this time, okay, so I've got 2 ellipses now on this circle layer. Ellipse 2 is selected. I'm going to choose a different color for it, and a different color for the stroke. Maybe just there we go. Okay, so then this ellipse, I want to center it to the other one. So I'm going to help myself out with going to View, Show Rulers, and then I'm going to drag out, I'm going to go to my selection tool, I'm going to drag out a guide from the ruler and line it up to, if I select the circle layer, the top level, then I can adjust the guide to line up with the anchor. So that's the center. And then when I select ellipse 2, then I can line up its anchor to the center. Maybe I'll make ellipse 2. I can open up ellipse 2 and adjust the stroke for ellipse 2. Stroke width thicker. And ellipse 2, let me close the stroke. I could adjust the size of ellipse 2. See, in path, and then the size can be bigger. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Okay, so then let me close up ellipse 2. Now ellipse 1, you can also select ellipse 1 and I can adjust, the stroke weight from up here at the top. I can also go into ellipse 1 and I can open up the stroke options, and I could do, let's say I want a dashed line. So I can go in dashes, and I can click add, the add button to the plus. Now I have dashes, so I'm just adjusting my design here. I can adjust the length of the dash to be wider or thinner. Let me just go to fit. So I can make the dashes. You can also adjust the line cap. It's a butt cap, like you do a round cap, and adjust the dash width there. The offset can move the dashes around. Let's see, meter limit. Oh no. Could do so that's round cap, projecting cap. I'll go back to the butt cap. Dash can be thinner. Okay. Then I could also adjust the offset so that the dashes If I keyframe the offset, the dashes can rotate, which will be cool. So I could have the dashes rotating. So I'm going to click the stopwatch for offset under dashes. And then I'm going to move, so that added a first keyframe, and I move the playhead forward for however long I want the dashes to rotate, and then I just adjust that value to some different value, and now they will be rotating around, which will be cool. Maybe I'll have that rotating all the way to the end. So I'll go to the end and I can drag this keyframe to line up with the playhead. While I'm dragging, I hold down shift, it lines up the keyframe to the playhead. So that will be rotating. Okay, another thing that I can do is add a transition to this layer, which is really cool to use the transition of, it's one of the effects under effect. There's some transitions you can try out, which I really like to use. I want to decide when I want this circle to appear, and I'm going to use a transition to make it appear on stage using the transition. So I'm going to start with, selecting the circle layer. Then I'm going to go to effect, and I'm going to add under transitions, and I'm going to try the Radial Scale Wipe. So I click to start that. So what happens when you add an effect? We're gonna get into effects, but I'd like you to try out transitions if you'd like. That'll score you some extra credit for the next week's assignment, which is gonna build off of this assignment. So you might as well try them now. So under effect, transition, I chose the Radial Scale Wipe. As soon as I chose that, it puts it on this layer and it gives me the controls in the effect controls panel, which it automatically opens up here. Now to really see what this does, we want to adjust completion up. So if I can adjust the number. It's at 0%, or I could flip open completion and use the slider. So this is what it's gonna look like. So I could have it come in, I could have it start at 100% and then come in. And notice by default completion, the center is the of completion is the center of document. If I move that center somewhere else by clicking here and then clicking somewhere else, or moving this around, then it's the center, the completion is going to be on one side of the circle. But I don't want it to be over there. I want it to be in the center, so I'll put it back to where it was. I could just drag this back to where it was, and then it's going to do its thing from the center of the circle out. So let's say I want it to start at 100 and then come in. So I want it to start at 100. So wherever I want this circle to come in, let's say after these guys leave the screen, then I want to keyframe completion from 100%. So I can click the stopwatch. That puts the first keyframe down, but you don't see that. It's on the circle until I press U, because remember, U is going to bring up properties that have keyframes. So anything that I keyframed it. So there's completion, the Radial Scale Wipe. I could also, let me just close this layer. I could also, I believe if I press E, it will bring up the effect, E for effect. So this is an effect. It's listed under effects. And then I can open it up, and then you see the options here. There's completion. There's the first keyframe. I can move the playhead forward, a duration of time. and then I can change the completion value up here in Effect Controls panel, or I could do it down here now that I have it in my timeline and adjust. Now it's coming in. So then that comes in, coming in, pretty cool. It's going a little slow because it's not rendering real time. You can see that in the info panel. So it's actually playing slower than real time because it's taking time to play that effect out. Okay, so maybe I want to try another transition on this layer, so I can add another transition. So I have to add a transition or an effect, you select the layer, and then you go to Effect, and then you go to whatever you want. In this case, we're focusing on transitions, and then I want to do, how about a Radial Wipe? So I click Radial Wipe, and then that added Radial Wipe along with Radial Scale Wipe. Now we have Radial Wipe, and then I can see how that one will work and by adjusting the transition completion. So I can adjust by either using the slider here or adjusting the number. But let me try the slider here. So it does sort of like a clock thing. Okay, reminds me of a clock. So, okay, so this comes in like that with the Radial Scale Wipe. And then let's say at a certain point, I want this transition to happen. So I click the stopwatch to start the Radial Wipe transition and then move my playhead forward. Actually, let me bring up, I'm going to press U to bring up just what I have keyframes on. So we have Radial Wipe here. Let me just adjust this so we can read. Then transition completion for Radial Wipe is there. And so that's the first keyframe there. And then I can adjust the transition completion for Radial Wipe. So we'll do this sort of like, reminds me of a clock. And so it goes like that. And maybe then I want it to hold at nothing. So then I click to add a keyframe, and then I go forward, and then I want it to go back, so it comes back. And then, okay, so that comes in like that to build, and then that sort of clock thing happens, and then it goes back, it comes back. And then maybe I want to end again with the other transition, the Radial Scale Wipe. So I've got Radial Scale Wipe here. So I want to hold the value at 0. It's at 0. So I click to hold the keyframe, and then I'm going to move my playhead forward in time. And this is how I want to end it. So I want to adjust the completion for Radial Scale Wipe back out to 100 so it completes. So now some fun stuff is happening. So it's coming. So that's the Radial Scale Wipe bringing in the circle. And then it's doing, then the Radial Wipe is doing this sort of clock thing and opening up. And then the Radial Scale Wipe finishes to pull that out. So that's the end of my animation. Stuff is happening. Actually, let me do one more thing. On my flower, going back to opening that up, I can go to the Add button, and maybe one thing that might look good is wiggle paths. You can try a lot of different ones, zigzag, just experiment. The worst thing that can happen is it doesn't work and you just delete it if you don't like it. So let's say I choose wiggle paths. So then my flower is going to have this automatic sort of wiggle to it, or jagged edges to it. And I can adjust that. So I can go into wiggle path and adjust the size of the wiggle. You can get crazy. The detail, if I want more detail, that's fun. Adjust the detail, adjust the points you want, corner or smooth. Wiggles per second, I can make it wiggle more frequently. Correlation, just, you just try these out, see what they do. Random speed, and then play it and see how it looks, see if you like it. So there is the wiggle paths. And again, if you don't like something, you can always select something that you've added and simply select it and press the delete key and it's gone. But I like it, so I'm going to do Command Z and bring it back. I undid that delete. Okay, so now I've got some exciting stuff going on. There we go. So that's kind of cool stuff going on. Now the next video, I'm gonna talk about adding sound using GarageBand. But for now, we've got an animation, stuff unfolding, building. One thing leads to another, and we have a clear beginning, middle, and ending, meaning the beginning, there's nothing there really. It's just an empty space, and then stuff comes in. Objects come in, they do their thing, they leave one after another. Different animations occur, and then everything is gone. So the goal is try to have an empty frame for the beginning where objects are coming in, leaving, and then you want everything to end up tapering down to another clean frame in the end. Okay, so that's one way. Another way is if you started with the same exact image at the beginning and the end, then you'll have a nice continuous loop. Okay, so that's animating the visuals. Gonna stop that.